iPad mini has really kind of changed my life. Finally, an iPad that is the right size, that is not too big, that doesn't weigh it like a brick. Finally, an iPad that I can, sit down, I can just read a book. I'm reading more. I can take it on the tube, I can fit it in my pocket, all of this kind of stuff. And finally, an iPad that really fits into my workflow as a device to consume books, videos, podcasts, all of this stuff, so I get more ideas into my second brain. First, I want to highlight where the iPad really shines, and that is as an inputs device for me. In the workflow that I've established, which is largely based on Tiago Forte's Building a Second Brain, there's two areas. First is the inputs, so that's reading lots of material, listening to podcasts, watching videos, and essentially taking notes. So I take notes of all the great ideas that I have and I put them in my Notion, right? And my Notion is using a template by Thomas Frank, right? And this enables me to take notes on all my great ideas. But of course, for this, I need to consume a lot of content. Now, consuming content on the iPhone is a bit too small of a device, and consuming content on my computer, I don't know, I just don't really like it. It's a bit too kind of worky for me. Instead, I like to break out and I like to use my iPad mini to read articles, to listen to podcasts, and all of this kind of stuff, and then I can take great notes. For example, in terms of reading, I have Kindle, right? And with Kindle, so this is 0 to 1, the book, and I'm able to then highlight specific passages very easily, really, really great stuff. And then later on, I can export these highlights and import them into my Notion. Another reading app that I like to use is called Command, and Command is a browser, so kind of like Safari or Google Chrome, except also, right, you can do highlights, and your highlights you're then able to export. So for example, I'll highlight this top sentence here. I can just cover that. I click highlight, you see, and that highlight now I can then export it. I can actually see all of my different highlights in the app. Additionally, to find interesting articles to then do highlights, I use the app called Artifact. Now, Artifact was made by the creators of Instagram, I believe, and what they do is like personalized news stories. So I have all of these news stories which are personalized to me, and if I find any of them interesting, I'll copy the link, I'll open it in that command browser, and then I can take highlights, right? And I can import it into my second brain. So you see, like as a reading device, the iPad mini is perfect, right? It's the perfect size. I can take copious amounts of highlights and all of this kind of stuff. And, I'm just reading generally a lot more than I used to. In terms of podcasts, I use Overcast. So Overcast, I think, is better than Apple Podcasts because it seems to sync between my devices. So if I'm listening to an episode on my iPhone, I can continue listening to it on my iPad, all of this kind of stuff. And in terms of taking notes, here's what my setup looks like. Let's say I'm listening to a podcast and I have a cool idea that I want to note down. What do I do? Well, I open up my Notion, and in my Notion, I have a quick capture, right? And this is one of the really great things about this Thomas Frank template, which is called Ultimate Brain. So you see, I have task inbox and note inbox. If it's a task, I'll put it in the task inbox. So for example, pick up the milk, right? But if I have a cool note, I'll add a note. And here is a great idea I had, and then some notes about the idea, right? Cool. And that's the note done, right? So it's really easy to take a quick note on the iPad when you're on the go. Now later on, you can then file it into one of your areas or resources of your life. So I'll explain this whole process in a separate video, which is this Building a Second Brain note-taking system. But essentially, you can see that I have certain areas, right, filled with all of the notes that I find interesting, right? So later on, I'll then file it. So you can see I have a bunch of different things. So for example, turn casual fans into die-hard fans. That's from 1,000 True Fans. Great stories, they connect with your audience with shared experiences that are authentic, shared universal truths, and show vulnerabilities. So that's story-worthy, right? So you see, I've got all of these cool ideas on my iPad that I can always, just occasionally look through. It's really cool. So the iPad really shines as a consumption device for getting ideas in, right? And Tiago Forte in his book calls this the divergence period. So it's going off on tangents, looking down, seeing this idea, reading about that, going down this way, reading about that, and kind of collecting lots of ideas. And you can see all of the ideas that I've collected here, right? However, when it comes to bringing ideas together and linking them and creating a kind of solid outline of a video or something like this, I use my computer. So let me show you a little bit how I do this. So what I do is I'll open up two windows. On one side, I'll have all of my notes, so my interesting points. And on the other side, I'll create the outline of the content. So for example, I have a script for a video that I'm going to do, which is on the book Show Your Work, right? And on the main takeaways, essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating points while highlighting the other notes that I've already have. So for example, you have to make stuff. So you have to make stuff, no one gives a damn about your resume. So you see I'm taking areas here and I'm kind of categorizing them. I'm putting them into a solid outline of this video that I'm gonna do. So for this, really, you need two screens, and really, I think you kind of need a computer. At least that's how I do it myself. That's not to say that the iPad mini is bad. However, I would say that the iPad mini has a specific function, has a specific role in this overall creative process that I have. And that is that it fulfills that part one. It fulfills that, grabbing the ideas. But when it comes to, outlining and bringing ideas together, I still use my MacBook Pro because, I have that benefit of, multiple screens, dragging, dropping, cutting and pasting, all of this kind of stuff. Overall, I would recommend the iPad mini to pretty much everybody. I'd give it a 10 out of 10, to be honest. It fulfills its job in my workflow process as a consumption device for getting great ideas. If you've never had an iPad or a tablet, or maybe you've had an iPad Air or iPad Pro, consider the iPad mini. It is a perfect size, and it is a kind of life-changing device. You'll read more, you'll consume more, and if you're a creator, you'll get more great ideas.